Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now it's time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Carla.
Where's she going? My name's Carla Moore, and I'm an alcoholic. There she is. Oh. Well, I want to thank Alan in absentia for asking me to come out and share with you guys tonight. I guess he's out of the country, so he's a lucky guy. And we're lucky to be here. I want to thank Susie for her talk, and thank you all for being here. I want to thank the newcomers for raising their hands, and it was nice to talk to Steve with his 11 months and to remember what it was like to have 11 months and feel the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous starting to come alive in my life. Boy, I was starting to pay rent more than 1 month in a row, you know, and God, I had this kid to raise, and like Susie, you know, I wasn't sure that this was going to be much more than a bad Tony Robbins motivational speaker kind of thing, you know. I really didn't know. I was sure after a few meetings that I was going to walk in here and you guys were all going to be standing in the back going, ha-ha, just kidding. And getting sober was not comfortable for me. And I finally had to surrender to the fact that you know, I had to get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable, because it's a whole new way of life. And it seemed like just when I'd get my feet, I'd be asked for something else. And I don't know what that is all the time. I had to keep rolling, and I had to come to these meetings, and I had to take some direction. I had to work these steps, and my life has changed. I've been sober since September 25th, 1987, and I have not had to have anything that affects me from the neck up. And before that, I never did anything for 19 years and some months in a row on purpose that was of any value. And so I am happy to be here, and I mean it when I say thank you, AA, for my life. When I got here, I would have told you I'm an alcoholic because of the crazy, dark, dramatic, violent, sometimes perverted family that I had. And I've been around here long enough to see that there are people all over the place who lived much, much harder lives than I did, and alcohol doesn't do for them what it does for me. And then there are people inside AA who live charmed childhoods, and they are absolutely as alcoholic as I am. And I know because I know them. So it wasn't that. It wasn't, my childhood gave me an inventory, that's for sure, but it didn't make me alcoholic. And I don't want you to think it was all bad either. You know, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade were awesome. Had a great time in elementary school. You know, I was just one of those kids. I was good in sports, and I was like kind of out there. I was good in school. School was kind of my refuge from home. I'd go to school, and I didn't have to worry too much. It wasn't so subjective, you know. It was like you do the work, you get the grade, boom, and I could do that, and I wanted more of that. And I was good in sports, and had a few friends, and I was out of myself. But that didn't last long. You know, by the time I was at the end of 6th grade, you know, I'd had to be the first person around the track and get the best grades and straight A's and be the bestest and the mostest and the biggest and that, you know, I was tired. I was tired by the end of 6th grade. And then I got my first social resentment in that summer between 6th and 7th grade into junior high. I got that behind a game of spin the bottle. And I know that game's since obsolete, probably long obsolete, but we played it back then, and we were at my friend's house, and we were sharing a bottle of his dad's whiskey and passing that around, and the bottle spun, and it landed on me, and I went off into the bedroom with one of the boys, and we were both doing the same thing as far as I could tell, but when we came back out, they called him a player and me a slut, and I did not think that was fair. And the way I am wired, I will die on the hill if it's not fair. You know what I mean? resentment embeds itself in me, and I just, I don't know how to accept the things I can't change. I just don't, not on the natch. And my pride kicked in, and I started to back away and withdraw from life, and that's what happens. My feelings got hurt, and I started to back away. And so I'm in 7th and 8th grade, and these weren't my first drinks, but these were the drinks that really started to work for me. These were the drinks that kept me sane, relatively sane, and going to get through this stuff, because I couldn't handle it. And I started spending more time in the girls' room than I did in the classroom, and after a while, school wasn't working for me either, so I started to find my hope out on the open road. And I love the open road. I love going anywhere. I still do. It's just that I like coming home too, and I have a home to come to, which is a big plus. And but back then, I could be found on the 10 freeway going east or the 101 freeway going north, and I'd get out there on that on-ramp, and I'd stick my little thumb out and crawl in the car or the truck, going wherever with whoever, and I'd be on my way to somewhere else. And I love that feeling. God, somewhere other than here and somebody other than me. And I just hope was out there. 35 cents in my pocket felt like faith. And I just went. I never made any big plans about what I was going to do when I got there. I just went. And when I was 14, I found myself in a place called North Beach in the San Francisco area. And a couple of guys propositioned my friend and I down there at Broadway and Kearny, and we did the next indicated thing, and boom, a whole new career path opened up for us. And I never developed any particular marketing strategy, but I started living a day at a time in a way I've not had to live in a very long time. And I'm not judging the profession. I'm just saying, it didn't work for me. I mean, look at Heidi Fleiss. She, was very successful, for a long time. And I mean, she was kind of like the Neiman Marcus of the thing, right? But alas, I was more like the 99-cent store, so. And I didn't even know how little by little I was chipping away at any dignity and self-respect I had. I was trading it away a nickel at a time, and just going down. And one of the birthday people, that lady said, come here and you'll learn that your life is worth saving. And I hope you do. I hope you stay long enough for that to happen for you. And I'd come home and try to live with Mom and try to live with Dad, and I started spending a little time in juvenile hall, a week, a weekend, a couple weeks, and like that, waiting for another place or going back home. And it just, the more I'd go out on the road, the less I was able to come back and integrate back into my community. I mean, I certainly wasn't going to tell you where I'd been on my summer vacation, that's for sure. And those feelings of difference just increased in me. I just felt so different and so much like I didn't have the manual for living that like you did. You all look like you did. And when I was 15, I was admitted to a mental hospital finally. The courts took over, and a psychiatrist said, okay, we want you in for 2 weeks. And I was supposed to be there 2 weeks, and I ended up being there for a year. I just sort of made myself at home and moved on in. And no thoughts of going home anymore or anything. I just, they weren't talking to me a lot about alcoholism. They were talking to me about disorders. And I was a very disordered looking child. I was 15 and a half years old and alternately violent and withdrawn. And they were giving me daily nutritional supplements, Thorazine, Meloril, Valium, Dalmane sleepers, in case I guess they were afraid I wouldn't sleep. And God, let her sleep. I was intimately familiar with 5-point restraints. I had many an uncomfortable conversation with a psychiatrist the morning after they'd loosened the leather straps, and I'd be laying on the mattress in the middle of the special room, and both of us wondering what the hell is wrong with me. And today I know that I was restless, irritable, and discontent. But back then I was disordered. And after a while I surrendered to the nut house, and if you don't want to go crazy, you better get busy, and that's what I did. And one of my favorite ways to get busy has always been boys. I love the boys. I'm always reaching from the outside to fill the gaping hole in my soul. And it was only till I got to AA, or it wasn't until I got to AA that I realized that giving from the inside out is what fills that hole. That hole gets smaller as I give to you rather than trying to take it in. But I would hang out with the boys, and I loved all of them, but my favorites were those sexy, smoldering types, you know the kind, ladies, right? You just don't know when they're getting ready to blow, you just never know when they're going to pop. And today I know that feeling as fear. but it was very exciting back then. But if you're in love with boys like that, then you're always going to have to say goodbye to them in the nut house because they're always doing something stupid to get hauled off to YA. And well, like my first boyfriend got hauled off for throwing a chair through the window, and my next boyfriend was hauled off for throwing a nurse through the window, so that was progressive too. And I don't know about you, but I've always thought I should have a soundtrack to my life, you know, music playing in the background of all this drama, this sweet agony. And I remember sitting out on the smoke break bench one afternoon and watching my boyfriend Terry being cuffed and escorted off by security on his way to YA. And I was smoking my tragic cigarettes and, you know, just playing Diana Ross at top decibel, you know, touch me in the morning, then just walk away. I was brokenhearted and blue before I ever had a real date, you know. It's it's all between my ears, you know. That's the drama. It's all the stuff that ain't happening. But you don't have to wait for long. In the nut house, there's always another boyfriend. I went from the girls' unit to the co-ed unit to the intensive care unit. You know, and I met the love of my life on the intensive care unit. He was kicking heroin in 17 days like we do, you know. And I am always shooting for the counterfeit, you know. I mistake brute strength for strength of character, sex for love, arrogance for confidence. You know, I'm just always half a bubble off, just, and as soon as I get it in my hot little hand, it turns to dust because it's not the real thing. It's just not real. And I'm what I came looking for, I came looking with, and that's, you know, that's what I got. And I didn't know how to settle any of that except to have a drink. I made it over the wall and under the wall or under the gate and out the front door quite a few times in that year that I was at the nut house. And every time I hit the street, I take a drink, and I'm better. I'm better now. You know, a lot of well-meaning people trying to give me a way to live sanely and normally in the real world, and a drink fixes me right now. And you know, the thing about God's will with that, you know, I mean, I've never denied the existence of God, but my ability to access that power greater than myself, or to feel it, or to use it, or to be in it, or to have it flow through me, has always eluded me. And, you know, if I didn't know what God's will was, or if I didn't like what God's will was, I could take a drink and not care pretty soon. So, you know, alcohol served me well for a long time. And I went over the wall with that boyfriend from the intensive care unit, and we were together just about 2 weeks. We were out there. I was 16, he was 22. I was coming off Thorazine. He introduced me to cocaine, and woohoo! I think it was just too much of a contrast for him. And, you know, weirdly enough, you know, just a couple weeks later, my probation officer knew exactly where to find me. And it took me a little while, but I realized I think he called her. And that hurt my feelings. But back in juvenile hall and back in a rehab, and my whole adolescent life went like that. You know, I was just in one place to the next. They're all trying to figure out what's wrong with Carla. And so is Carla sometimes. You know, I had my doubts, and I didn't know what was going on, really. Sometimes I have to confess, I felt very much like a political prisoner, really. You know, just... And when I turn 18, it's all going to be okay, but that didn't happen either. And the last place I was in was a girls' home in Pasadena, and I met my roommate, and we took off. We took off for Eugene, Oregon, where, you know, the cool of the old San Francisco days, the cool of all the 60s, which I'd always been in love with the idea of the 60s. I was 12 in 1969, so they were over by the time I got out in the world. But I loved what I thought they might have been. You know, people stood up for things, and there was peace and love and flowers and all of that stuff. And we heard they'd all gone to Oregon. So we went up to Eugene, Oregon, and you know, they were right. It slowed down, and there was kind of a different kind of pace, and the Grateful Dead was in the air then. And, you know, when they talk about hoeing up there, they mean with a garden tool. And I thought my life was going to get different from the outside in again. And two things happened up there. And one was, if I wasn't going to do what I'd been doing for a living, I wasn't always going to be able to drink the way I needed to drink. And when I can't drink and I have no sober solution, a fellowship, a program, a God, I am restless, irritable, and discontent, very hard to get along with. And the other thing that happened was, when I could afford to drink the way that I needed to drink, I am always overshooting the mark. I just can't predict if I'm going to have 2 or 22, and most of the time it's the latter, even at 17 years old. And if you're doing that, then sooner or later, you're living on your friends' couches. They're going to come to you and say things like, Carla, we love you, but you got to go. And that was to happen a lot. And I left and moved into a little plastic lean-to in the Oregon forest out with a guy I met hitchhiking. And we lived together till we couldn't stand each other anymore. And then I was flung out back down to LA, and I was trying to live with my father, trying to recoup the relationship, since after all, he did have the house. And it was nice to live indoors. And I didn't know how to get out of that house. You know, I didn't know how to tell him. I didn't know how to tell him I was afraid to go out in the world and try to work 8 hours with somebody and then come back in and then go back out and do it again. I didn't know how to tell him that. I didn't know how to tell him. I didn't know where the last few years of my life had gone. I sat on his couch in his den and I drank from his liquor cabinet. And I drank until right before my 18th birthday. He came to me and he said what I know were the hardest words my father ever had to say to his oldest daughter, and that's, I'm not going to watch you die and I'm not going to help you do it. You got to go. And I knew that day was coming too. You know, we were just milk it till the very, very end. And that's what happened. And on my way out that door, all I could think of was that one of the counselors at the rehab had told me I was a great actress. And I know today I must have misunderstood, but I ended up on Hollywood Boulevard, and there's not a lot of auditioning going on out there. And I was 18 years old, start my days off with a pint of vodka, and I would go wherever the day took me. And some days it was a party, and some days it was surviving. And it was just one gray day stretching out over another, and there wasn't a lot of hope of it getting any different. And things happen to young girls out there, and what you do is you fall down, you take a drink, and you get up, and you keep walking. And that's what it was. And I have a feeling that there are a few people in here that know that kind of drinking. And a few months into that, I met a man walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and I saw the light in his eyes and didn't realize it was orange sunshine, but we hit it off, and I moved in with him that night. I didn't even know his last name, and I moved in with him, and 6 weeks later he's asking me to leave, and I still don't know his last name. But I like to bring him up because he was on my 8-step list when I first got sober in my first year. He was somebody I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had just run through his life like that proverbial tornado, you know, just physically, materially, emotionally, in every way in that short time, just, and he'd been nothing but kind to me. And so I tried to find him for a while, and then it was obvious I wasn't going to. And my sponsor said, you're just going to have to change your own behavior. You know, well, start by trying to be a friend to a man in a vertical fashion. Why don't you start there? And practice these principles in your friendships, you know, in your relationships out there. And I am a friend to, I have friends of both genders these days, and I know what that is. I know what it is to be one and to have one. And that's a gift of this program. Then right before my 13th AA birthday, I had to go give a talk on the other side of town, and it was a hot Sunday afternoon, and I didn't feel like going. Thank God you guys have taught me it's what I do and not how I feel that matters. And I went out there and I gave the talk, and I felt good. I kept my commitment. And when the thank you line came through at the end, this man stopped and he said, hey, where were you in 1976? And it was a guy from Hollywood Boulevard. And he was standing in front of me with 8.5 years of sobriety, and I with almost 13. And see, you know, only my God, only a big, giant creative intelligence could orchestrate something like that, when I, in all my efforts, 12 years before that, couldn't find him. And there he stood in front of me, and I got to make those direct amends to him. And it took me a little while to realize that had I found him in that first year, my first year of sobriety, when I went looking, he wouldn't have been sober yet, and maybe he wouldn't have gotten it. Maybe it wouldn't have been the same kind of exchange. So I'm glad things happened the way they did. I'm not always happening in the moment, but later I am. That was a long time to come, and I spent the rest of that year in Hollywood, and then I hooked up with another boyfriend from another rehab, and again, flying on the coattails of the 60s, we both just loved the idea of peace, love, and all that stuff. We just couldn't stop knocking the hell out of each other really long enough to implement the principles fully of peace and love. And so we beat each other up and down the California coast, and we pitched a tent in the mountains in southern Oregon, and we lived there till the rains came, and then moved into a roofless cabin just north of Grants Pass, threw a plastic tarp over the top, called it a skylight, and then the baby came, and we lived in a little trailer. It was like I don't know, 10 by 20 foot trailer we lived in, and we had this little girl, and she got in the way of one of our fights when she was about 10 months old, and I took her up to Idaho, where it's going to be better. It's got to be better up there. And I had 3 jobs in Idaho. I was attending bar and cocktail waitressing. Any normal person could have made a good living doing what I was doing, and yet, and it was a job I could handle. You know, it was like, for me, like getting up and getting dressed and going to the party. You know, it was a dream job for me. But I couldn't bring home enough money to pay rent for more than a week at a time. And my kid was one of those kids by then that you see with her t-shirt and underwear and yesterday's lunch going on the front of it because the mom's not paying attention. And after a while, of course, Idaho's not working for us anymore either. And I was drinking straight scotch. You know, I'd just gotten down to if I just drink straight scotch, don't put any soda or any of that stuff in there, that gives you a hangover. And, you know, stick to the scotch. And back down in LA, and I'm renting a room for my aunt in Covina, and I'm working at a bar in Hollywood. And again, a great job, not a bad job to have, except the fact that I had it. And my daughter was almost 4 years old by then, and every afternoon I'd kiss her goodbye, and I'd take off for that bar in Hollywood, and I'd stop at the halfway point for my drinks, which was a place called the First Cabin in Arcadia. And I'd stop in there and I'd have my shots of Cuervo Gold and Bud Backs and, you know, the primer drinks, the drinks that get me ready to get up and go do my shift. And then I'd go out to Hollywood and I'd pour drinks and drink with everybody till the wee hours of the morning and crawl back home and start all over again. And one afternoon I kissed my girl goodbye as I'd done over and over and over, and I stopped at that same bar in Arcadia and had those same shots of gold and same Bud Backs, and something was just a little bit different that day. Something was just a little further down the road. I didn't hate that job in Hollywood, and I didn't love my daughter any less on that day than I love her today. But I could not suspend my drinking long enough to get up and go take care of business either way. And I sat on that bar stool and I lost them both in one fell swoop. The kid and the job were gone. And I sat there and I lived off the kindness of strangers there in that little place in Arcadia for about a month. Every night about midnight I'd hear the band playing and I'd feel my gut wrench and my throat close, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt you could walk my daughter up to me and say, you know, Carla, you can have her back if you'll quit drinking. That it wasn't going to happen. You know, for me, alcohol had become my priority. And I'm surrendered to the fact today that if Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't remain my priority, alcohol will again become it. It's just that simple for me. I feel alcoholism as much or more at almost 20 years of sobriety than I did when I first got here. And then I fell into another job and another dive bar, and now the bars and the people are getting increasingly rustic. And my drinking became the topic of that bar, and I just kept saying, you know, I've been in this business too long. If I could get married and make my life look like I thought yours was, and get the kid back and take care of his kids and all of that stuff, you know, it would be different, you know, it'll be different this time. And so he and I got married about the time we should have split up, and we moved into that little apartment and became a very active household. I threw the first punch in that relationship because I know the drill, I know how it's supposed to go. And we bought ourselves a big gun to protect ourselves from the Night Stalker. And the only people we turned that gun on was each other. I just tried to get to it first. And my first exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous was after one of our fights. We were at the bar where we drank, and we were fighting over whether or not I should get off the bar stool. And I lost that fight, and I ended up with some black eyes and broken ribs. And not a lot of people feeling sorry for me, just glad I was leaving. And he picked me up, he took me to the hospital, and he brought me back home, and he had to leave for work that weekend. So before he left me with a giant ice chest full of beer and a bottle of Beefeater gin chilling on top. And now I'm drinking gin because tequila had been making me really mean, you know, and you understand. And I started drinking and dialing. I don't know all of who I called, but I know I felt like a battered woman, so I called a battered woman's shelter. And I asked the woman who answered the phone to fix my life. And she asked me if I'd ever been to an AA meeting. Now, I don't know how she made that leap, but she did. And what I heard her say was that if I went to an AA meeting, she'd fix my life. So I wandered down, and I found one not too far from where we were living, and two very kind women sat me down, gave me the newcomer packet, you know, a cup of coffee and a tissue. And I was feeling very sorry for myself and not looking very pretty. And that night, you know, I went in there and I heard a perfectly wonderful speaker that night. A woman stood up there for 45 minutes talking about her drinking and her sobriety. And there's one thing that I cannot make you, and that is ready. I cannot give you that. I cannot make you hear what I'm saying, and I can't make it touch you. That's something we have to come to on our own. That's something that we have to pick up. It is a gift, and it rains on all of us. And the difference between those who stay and those who go are the ones who pick it up and do it. Not the ones who want it, need it, any of it. It's the ones who do it. We're the lucky ones. And I didn't hear her. I heard the woman say that somewhere during her drinking career she switched to beer, so I did. I walked out of that room that night thinking, AA will tell you to switch to beer. So for the next couple of years, I drank beer. You know, I came to with a beer and I passed out with a beer. And it gave me the illusion that I was controlling my drinking, and it was kind of soothing to my body because it had been ravaged. It was I weighed 110 pounds. I'm almost 6 feet tall. I had those sunken eyes and that swollen face and that distended liver, and I just looked like a beach ball on stilts, and I felt like if you blew on me, I'd turn to dust, you know. And we got evicted from that apartment and ended up living in a little room in his ex-wife's backyard. None of us liked that very much. And I got a little job answering phones. I figured if I could do that at home, I could do it for somebody else maybe. And there would be mornings where I'd get up and I'd think, God, if I can I make it to work without a drink? Can I make it to noon without a drink? And if I could, if I could get started without having that first drink, it would be all I could think about till noon, you know. And then if I could make it maybe till noon to 5 without a drink, then it would be all I could think about. So I'm either drinking or thinking about drinking. And that's just that terrible, terrible place to be. And most of the time I had to have something. I had to have a little something that would get me through. And we moved into a little place across Pasadena for one more hideous, tedious, violent year. One more Saturday afternoon where the cops are in the driveway and the neighbors are peeking out the window wondering what's going on at Charlie and Carla's house one more time. And the kid's now almost 10 years old, and she's got that look of fear in her eyes. She's standing over in the corner, and I can see it in her eyes that one more time, you know, and I can't even try to tell her it's going to be any different. It hadn't been different in a long, long time. And the cops left, the husband left, they took the gun. It was me and the kid, and I sat and I drank. I drank at you and me and them and everybody who'd ever done me wrong. And oh my God, I was just so filled with self-pity. And you know, my anger, everything, all those negative emotions for me are born of self-pity. You know, it's just, they got mine, you got mine, God's taken out of my bucket to give to you. Oh, and it's a very, you know, it's very comfortable for me back then. My first sponsor told me if I wanted to affect a conscious contact with a power greater than myself, that I could start by counting the coincidences that happened in my life. And one of the first ones I could count was that I had moved in next door to a woman who had 5 years of sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she had seen and heard the whole fight go down. And a few days later, she brought me a big book and a 12 and 12. And she came in, she knocked on my door, she sat down on my couch, and she just told me her story. And in her story, I could tell she used to drink like me. And over the last year, I had seen with my own eyes that she wasn't drinking anymore. And what impressed me more about that was it didn't seem to bother her that she wasn't drinking. You know, that impresses me. See, without some kind of sober solution, some God or fellowship or steps or just something real to put me between me and the bottle, I feel like you've stripped all the coating off my wires. You know, I feel oversensitive and underloved. I don't know what you meant by that or why you looked at me that way. And my life gets worse from there. I just get completely uncomfortable, and there's nothing that will soothe that, nothing. And so I was interested, but I just didn't really believe that what she had, that I could have what she had. And she left that afternoon, and before she left, she turned to me and she asked me if I had trouble accepting life on life's terms, and I said, absolutely not. Life sucks, and I fully understand that. And got no problem with that. And it was about a week and a half later, one Sunday afternoon, I just didn't go back and buy any more beer. I just didn't. And exactly what I thought was going to happen happened. It had happened many times before, but I drank through it, and that was a DTs. You know, I started to shake and into the night get sick and start to see and hear things that weren't there. And I shook into Monday, and I shook into Tuesday. And by Tuesday afternoon, I really didn't know what to do anymore. It was, I'd never been there before. And I went back to my neighbor, and I asked her what to do, and she sent me up to a meeting in Sierra Madre that night. And she told me to raise my hand, and I went up there, and I did that. And they welcomed me in, and I heard a lot of hope in that meeting. Again, though, like I said before, I wasn't sure it was going to be enough for me. I wasn't sure these 12 steps were going to be big enough for somebody as extra anxious and extra disordered as me. I'm happy to report that they have been, but I went up there and sat way back by the exit sign just in case, and the secretary did something very nice for me at the end of that meeting that night. She brought me that portion of A Vision for You that we read at a lot of meetings at the end, and she brought it back to me, and I just sat there and I took it from her, and I don't know why. It was, I'm glad I didn't get up and walk out. I'm glad I didn't say no. I'm glad I said yes. And if you ask me all these years later, yes is still the best answer in Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes. Yes, I'll lead. Yes, I'll speak. Yes, I'll pour coffee. Yes, I'll set up chairs and go pick up that newcomer. Because all that yesing keeps me in the middle of the room. It keeps me in the middle. It keeps me in the posture of hearing the message when my soul and my spirit and my head sometimes can't get here. You know, it keeps me here, ready or primed to get the message. And So I read that night, and I kept coming back to meetings. You guys kept inviting me back, and I got this sponsor, and I had to drink after 89 days. I could not step across that bridge of faith until I took that drink at 89 days. And then as soon as I did, I wanted back what I'd had just a couple minutes ago. But I had to finish the drunk. And just about 24 hours later, my sponsor came and picked me up, and I had my last drinks at my kitchen table, and she picked me up and she took me to the Big Book study that night, and they gave me commitments and to every meeting that I went to up there, and I've been sober ever since. I took the steps that year. I made my first round of amends to my family. I owed them the most. I made my amends to everybody, but my family I owed the most, and that was, there was an initial round, and then there was a lifelong commitment to them. I had consistently and daily brought misery and fear and discomfort and anxiety into their lives, and so it was going to take a lot longer than just telling them, and I knew what I had done wrong. It was going to take a long time, and it did. My dad didn't really believe this thing was going to work till I was about 12 years sober. And, that was just him. He just breathed a sigh of relief for whatever reason. It was 12 years. And it wasn't that we weren't getting better together on the way, but 12 years he was pretty confident. And so if you're new and you're just making those first amends, chin up, because, it could be a while. But it matters that I did it, Women started asking me to sponsor them, and God, that'll get you out of yourself. And somebody like me, I need to be very busy at certain times. I need to come back in and I need to do the internal work, but then I need to be out there and not thinking about me. The best thing I've gotten from Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe, for me, is the relief from the inside of my own head. And, because it is big and busy. It sounds like one of these rooms on coffee break, sometimes, and it just, and I learned, when I got here, I didn't know what self-centered meant. I didn't understand that all that was self-centered fear, all those anxiety attacks and all that stuff. It was just me thinking about me and more of me and whatever happened to you, how did it affect me? And that's the only reason I thought about you. And but I got here, and every chair I sat up, and every time I had to stick my hand out and say, hi, how you doing? I'm Carla, and listen for your name, and try to remember your name, and try to remember what you did for a living, and how many kids you had. And pretty soon, I wasn't listening to the inside of my own head anymore. And, it was like that self-centeredness began to sort of melt away. And when I get that kind of result, I just go back and do what I did again, just do it again. God knows I did that enough out there. And after a couple of years, I'd had you guys. I was going to 2 and 3 meetings a day, and keeping my job and everything. I was putting food on the table, and the kid was clothed and bathed and everything, but she didn't have a mom, really. I was busy being wonderful in Alcoholics Anonymous, and for all the good it did, I probably needed every meeting I had up till then. But when I was about 2.5 years sober, my daughter had begun to come home beat up and bloody at all hours of the night. She'd been jumped into a gang at 12.5 years old, and she was running. She was trying to find her sense of family and camaraderie out in the street where I used to. And it was time to get her some big help, and so I found a treatment center for her and put her in. It was just a weird kind of thing for me, because I thought I was signing my kid's life away, and I just didn't. I still hadn't fully come full circle to be able to do that and feel great. But I was signing the papers, and we were there, and I had to lie to her to get her there, and I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I looked up, and it was one of the guys from my home group, and he was one of the counselors there. And then the recreation guy walked by, and it was another friend of mine. And the guy who was a counselor, he had been a counselor also at another treatment center where I used to go pick adolescent girls up and take them to meetings. And so, it was just like we were everywhere. And I knew she was going to be all right. And 6 months later, she got out, and things were better with us. This is the place where I learned that mountains are moved a spoonful at a time. This is a place where I learned a penny adds up to $1, days add up to years, how to live in the middle, how to live with unresolved problems, how to live without the instant gratification all the time, how to get up and do my best even though I don't know what it's going to turn out to be. And this was part of making my amends to my daughter. I owed her big time. And she got out and she wanted to go live with her dad after a few months and see what that was like. And I had to get out of the way and let her go do it. I mean, it was fine. And I'd pick her up on my weekends, and that worked out just fine. And while she was gone, I kept getting better jobs and stayed active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I turned 5 years sober. And a couple months after that, I came home from the gym one night and took my shower as usual and went to bed and woke up in the middle of the night to a man standing over my bed with a knife to my neck and his hand over my mouth. And he said, "Don't say a word or I'll cut your head off." And he took the telephone cord and he tied my hands behind my back and he raped me and he robbed me that night in my bed. And I want to tell you, at 5 years of sobriety, I had a big God. I had a much bigger God than I got here with. And I had that sense that even though things might not go the way I wanted them to go, that they were going the way they were supposed to go. The second step asked me to choose to believe, or choose what I'm going to believe. Do I believe God is everything, or do I believe he's nothing? Is he or isn't he? And I have nothing to lose by choosing to believe God's everything. And I've had a lot of ideas about God, since I've gotten here. I mean, they've changed. My concept has changed. And all I can say about that quickly is just today I feel more a part of what I believe in rather than being separate from. And that's just come from taking these steps, from opening up and being of service and allowing this to flow. I'm a little sentimental tonight, I think. After a couple of hours, he left out the same window he came, and it turned out that I knew him. I'd actually watched him get sober 30 days before I did. I watched him get his life, his wife, his kids, and everything back, and then I watched him join the church, leave AA behind, and when he went out like that. And what I gleaned from that is that while the big book tells us to be quick to see where religious people are right, and there are a lot of great ways to worship out there and to practice that 11th step, this is a place where I learned the terms and conditions of my disease. This is a place where I learned that I'm not one of those people who can go home after a Sunday sermon or a synagogue or wherever it is that I go and have a glass of wine. I'm not one of those people. And this is where I learned that. Once I do that here, I can go anywhere I want or nowhere. This has been enough for me. My sponsor told me I was going to have to forgive this guy, and I knew she's right. At 5 years of sobriety, I know I am one of those people who can't handle even seemingly justifiable resentments. And yet, I'm scared and I'm mad. I mean, he had scared me. And my favorite place to go is to be angry. I mean, anger makes me feel like I've got a focus and a purpose and that you can't hurt me. But every time a car door would slam, I'd jump and then I'd get mad, And at 5 years of sobriety, anger is like a suit that doesn't fit anymore. I can't be angry and I can't not be angry. And I don't know what that's supposed to look like. I don't know how I'm supposed to do that. So that 7-step prayer, my sponsor Marguerite had me read that 7-step out of the 12 and 12 every day and say that 7-step prayer and go in and act like you've had an attitude adjustment. And then there was a court trial that followed. And as part of the defense, he'd had a lot of the guys I had known years before in the bars come up and testify as to who I used to be. And it was kind of like having a little public 5th step, And a lot of the things they said were true, but some of them weren't. And then we had to get a character witness come up and talk for me. And it turned out that the division head at the investment firm where I was working showed up for me. He just volunteered. I mean, some people just know the right thing to do. And they told him all about who I used to be. And he said, yeah, but she shows up early and she stays late. And she was where she said she was that afternoon. And see, that's Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. I didn't have to coach him. Nobody had to coach him. He just got up and he spoke of the experience he had had through me. And that was it. And then it was my turn to testify, and I was sitting in the witness stand, and I saw him sitting out at the defense table. It's a place where I've sat, and I could sit again. And it occurred to me that what stood between he and I at the time was a drink. And if I were to go out and drink, it might not be rape, but it could be something equally as destructive eventually. And what happened for me at the moment was that we became two alcoholics sitting on opposite sides of the courtroom. And just a little chink in the armor came in, I mean, I wasn't free of the whole thing that day, but a little chink came in, and I didn't have to be bitter and paint all of mankind with the same brush that I was painting him with, and then I had to put down the paintbrush altogether. For another year and a half, I had the nightmares and all of that stuff, and he got 20 years and he did 13. And when that trial was over, the detective who worked the case came to me and he said, I don't know who you were back then. I'm not even sure I want to know. But whatever it is you're doing now, keep doing it because it seems to be working. And see, that's Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. I get stuck on that a lot. There's a long way to go, and I'm running out of time. But he just got out this last September, and I hope that we see him in these rooms again. I hope that maybe I see him far away first, but I hope that, to be honest, but my sponsor reminds me that I don't have to do any of this alone, and we're better off if he's in here than if he's out there. And that I don't want to argue about that after the meeting, but we'll just pray for him, we'll put it that way. And I've made a lot of big mistakes. I've gone bankrupt and had to pay that money back in sobriety. There was a lot of years between then and now, and I had boyfriends and that didn't work out, and all of that kind of stuff, big joys and big disappointments. And I want to tell you, my daughter came back to live with me, and I got to be present at the birth of my first grandson, and now I have two, one's 11 and one's 6, and they're the lights of my lives, and they've never had to see their grandma in the same shape their mother had to. And my daughter's forgiven me of all that stuff. And my father doesn't have to sit up nights anymore watching the news to make sure his daughter's name isn't on the list of the victims of the serial killers of the day, because he knew right where I was, and every night he worried. And he doesn't have to worry anymore, and he told me that. And my mother was the hardest. When about a couple of years before I got sober, my baby sister committed suicide at the age of 17, and it took her all weekend to die, and we were all at the hospital. And while she was on life support, I would go out from the waiting room and into the car, and I'd drink, and then I'd come back into the waiting room, and I just raked my mother across the coals, and I talked to my mom in a way that a daughter should never talk to her mother, much less when her baby lay dying in the next room. And I don't know how you make amends for that, really, except that I was told to make a call to her once a week and to try to find out in every way how I could make her life more comfortable and look for those ways. And lo and behold, many years later, I am good friends with my mother, and I love her. I even like her most of the time. And when I don't have to say it. I don't have to remind her of that. And we get along just fine. It's great. And so much so that when my baby brother died of this disease 4 years ago, he was 30 years old, 160 pounds, 6'10", as he lay on life support with little pinholes in his heart, and he wasn't going to stop. He had pinholes in his heart from doing the crank, and he wasn't going to stop drinking. And when mercifully he died, a few days later, I got to go up and be the kind of a daughter my mother needed while she buried yet a second child. And I don't know what kind of pain that is for a parent, really, but I know that this time, because of AA, I got to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And I'll just tell you a little something about me now, and then I'll sit down and shut up. It's been a really, really tumultuous year, and now we're coming out the other side, I feel like I'm kind of being washed up on shore. And about a year and a half or so ago, I started taking ballroom dancing lessons, not Dancing with the Stars stuff, but ballroom dancing lessons. I mean, I had to stop surfing, because surfing, I was getting really beat up. That's kind of like having the domestic violence without the relationship. I just couldn't do that anymore. I had to find something else. And so I started dancing, and I didn't realize what that would do for me. My God answers questions I don't ask out loud, and that's how I know there is one. And all these years I've tried to sort of, go along and not do anything inappropriate, not be the woman I used to be as far as, that sexual, oversexed, whatever, just looking for the substitute all the time. I wanted to, be a lady is what I wanted to be. And sometimes that can we can overdo things. I don't know, that's an unfamiliar concept maybe to you, but, and, turtlenecks and just very stiff, and all that's fine, except for when your dance teacher's trying to teach you rumba. And, you're supposed to get a little wiggle on when you do that dance, and it's a dance of love, for Christ's sake. And, about, half an hour into the dance lesson, he said, "Oh, Carla, please do not try to dance like a good girl. I don't think they will believe you anyway." And, in the big book, there's a promise that said that cling to the thought that in God's hands our dark past will become our greatest asset. And my life, my dark past has been woven into this huge tapestry that is my life. It's there for those who need to see it, and yet I walk free, a free woman in the real world. And God, that's because I came here and I did a few things you guys asked me to do, and I stay in touch, and I pass it along. And I want to thank you guys for letting me do that tonight.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.